Unfortunately, there's no partridge in a pear tree to be found in today's case. This Christmas countdown might not leave you with too much festive spirit at all. This time of the year, it should be all about fun, laughter, spending time with friends and family, just, the ones you care about. Unfortunately, Christmas is not immune to crime. Murder does not take a time off just because it's the end of December. And shockingly enough, some of the most horrific killings happen during the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday. Today, I will be walking you through a family holiday that turned into a deadly witch hunt. This is the horrific story of Kristy Bamu. Hey Boujee True Crimers, and welcome back. If you're new, it's just welcome to Evil Strikes, which is a true crime series delivered to you in commentary style or makeup tutorial. Today we're doing commentary style because we do not have time to be bothered with makeup. We are all things true crime over here, so if that's up your alley, you might as well get comfortable, join the rest of us, and subscribe. Share this video with just one friend and get comfortable, because we have a lot of cases to talk about like today's. So for today's case, we are going to be traveling over to Africa, specifically Zaire. So on February 21st, 1983 in Zaire, which was previously known as Democratic Republic of Congo, Magali Bamu was born to her parents Pierre and Jacqueline. The family then moved to Paris, and this is where Pierre would open his carpentry business, designing and manufacturing furniture. He later moved him and his wife back to Congo to continue the business. However, a now 13-year-old Magali was left to live with her mother's niece Phoebe and her husband Ferdinand in Dagenham, East London. She was treated horribly, like a slave. Later in her life, she met Eric Bakubi through a mutual friend, and the two hit it off instantly. He was a football coach, and the relationship started off great, but it didn't last very long. Unfortunately, Eric became extremely controlling, verbally abusive, and refused to let her wear makeup and see her friends. Eric Bakubi was also born in Congo in 1983. Unfortunately, his mother passed away at childbirth. Throughout his life, his father taught him about a type of witchcraft called kindoki, which was widely believed in Congo to be responsible for child possession. When a child is pointed out, usually by a religious leader or elder, as possessing kindoki, steps would be taken to rid the child of the evil spirit that was possessing them. Now, some of these practices included beatings, salvation submissions, water deprivation, and continuous prayer without food. It's believed that during the possession, this evil spirit has taken over the child, so they are unable to feel the pain from the horrible mutilations and beatings that they would receive, which obviously is not the case. Simple things that children would do would be viewed as indications of kindoki possession, such as wetting the bed, biting your nails, and stealing a pencil. Very ordinary things with extremely dangerous consequences. During their relationship, Eric would talk about the visions that he would have as a child, like seeing rats that were never there. Much like Magali's family, Eric and his uncle also fled Congo in 1990 to escape the war there, and they settled in London. And his uncle would talk more and more about kindoki to him and the witchcraft before he too would pass away. Throughout the relationship, Magali said that Eric grew more obsessed with sorcery and witchcraft, and that he began having dreams of his brother killing him. So to get rid of these awful thoughts and the evil spirits that he claimed were coming after him, he would move around London to different apartments to quote unquote outrun these spirits. But this didn't work, so he began consulting Nigerian pastors for help. Early in 2010, Eric proposed to Magali, which made her siblings even more excited to come from Paris to London to visit the couple for Christmas. According to Kelly Bakubi, which is the younger sister to Magali, so she's 20 years old, everything started off very well for the first couple of days that they were visiting the couple, but suddenly it turned sour. And when Eric and Magali began accusing all 5 of the siblings of being possessed with Kendoki, things took a turn for the worse. Other than Kelly, all of the other siblings were born and raised in Paris, so they didn't have the same upbringing that Magali and Kelly did, and so therefore they were extremely confused as to what Kendoki was and why Eric and Magali kept treating them like they were possessed with demons. And they would constantly plead with the couple, telling them that they were not possessed. But unfortunately, the torture would begin. The siblings were made to pray constantly. They were refused food and drink, beaten, and Eric even forced them to jump out of a window to see if they could fly. When I heard that, all I could think about was that movie with Michael Ealy when he threw those kids out the window. Y'all know the movie I'm talking about. I still can't forgive Michael Ealy to this day because of that movie. I just can't. I can't look at him the same after that. Kelly said no matter how much they begged him to stop torturing them, that it was clear his mind was already made up, and he genuinely believed that the siblings had traveled to London to kill him because, again, he believed they were all possessed with Kendoki. This was someone that they looked up to for protection and safety, but their 29-year-old sister was allowing this man to continue abusing them. Eventually, Kelly and her 11-year-old sister confessed to being witches just to avoid the beatings that they would receive from Eric and Magali, and that worked for them. But unfortunately for their brother Kristy, that wouldn't be the case. So the same night that the sisters made their confession, Kristy was beaten severely and involuntarily wet himself. Eric caught wind of what he did, and he took this as a sign that Kristy had to be possessed with Kendoki, and so he began to focus on Kristy, specifically zeroing in on him. So one other thing I wanted to mention in regards to the soiled undergarments. So when Kristy wet himself due to the beatings, he had to hide his underwear somewhere so that Eric wouldn't find them and think that it was Kendoki. But unfortunately, when Eric came across the underwear, they were hidden somewhere in the kitchen. And so Eric believed that Kristy was trying to poison everyone's food with the soiled underwear, which is why it was hidden in the kitchen, so that I guess he could secretly do it at some point, and that led to further beatings. Eric even encouraged the other siblings to join in on the torture. They were forced to restrain Kristy while his sister Magali would smash bathroom tiles on his back, hit his hands with a hammer, used a knife to make cuts all over his body, and used pliers to mutilate one of his ears. For 3.5 days, the torture continued, resulting in over 130 separate injuries. On the 4th day, which was Christmas Eve, Kristy started begging and pleading for his sister Magali to just let him die. Eric began forcing the siblings to clean the blood from the apartment while playing loud music and screaming at them, which led to a noise complaint from a neighbor. But the complaint was never followed up on. That piece of information right there took me to the Jeffrey Dahmer case and how those neighbors continuously called police about strange noises, foul smells. They always complained about a number of things coming from Jeffrey's apartment. But of course, the police didn't care, and they just kind of wrote everything off. And just like Jeffrey Dahmer's case, if the police would have followed up on the noise complaint, they would have inadvertently stumbled across what these two were doing to those kids. Later that night, Eric made a call to Pierre and Jacqueline, telling them that Kristy was possessed with Kendoki, and if they didn't come to get Kristy, that he was going to, So at first, the parents were super confused. They didn't understand why he felt that way, but suddenly they snapped right out of it and started figuring out how they were going to organize a rental for a 6-hour car ride from Paris to London. So while the parents were driving on this 6-hour journey, Eric and Magali forced the 5 children into the bathtub and started hosing them down with icy cold water as a cleansing ritual. As a result of the 3.5 days of torture, alongside the sleep deprivation and the 130 injuries Kristy suffered, he was mentally and physically exhausted, and on December 25th of 2010, his head slipped under the water. The couple at this point decided that they needed to call the ambulance, and the paramedics arrived at the scene, taking him to the hospital to resuscitate him. But he was already gone. At 8 p.m. that night, Kelly Bamu called her father and told him the devastating news that her brother, his son, Kristy, was dead. Eric and Magali were arrested at once, and they were charged with murder and 2 counts of actual bodily harm. They both pled guilty to actual bodily harm on the grounds of diminished responsibility caused by brain damage. But this was rejected, and the case had to go to trial. The jury consisted of 7 women and 5 men. The judge said due to the gruesome evidence of this horrific crime, they were excused from serving jury duty this time. Eric's defense claimed his brain injury, his cultural upbringing, and schizophrenia diminishes his responsibility for his actions. Magali's defense argued that she was manipulated as she didn't believe in witchcraft, aka Kendoki. Kelly, however, testified against her sister and had no pity for her, as she spoke of the lack of remorse from her sister against her and her other siblings while they begged and pleaded for her to stop as she brutally beat and tortured them. So at the trial, there was a woman by the name of Naomi Ilonga and her boyfriend, and they stayed with the couple 2 years prior to the murder in 2008 for about 3 days, and they too were also accused of possessing Kendoki because Naomi was a nail biter. So as a result of this, Eric and Magali would keep her up and refrain her from eating and sleeping for the entire time she was with them. They would pray with her, and she had very long hair, like down to the middle of her back, and they cut all of that off to release the spirits of Kendoki. Now luckily for her, she called her mom, and her mom was able to come and rescue her before they were able to do anything more serious to her. Now unfortunately for Magali, she was punished because she allowed Naomi to get away. So Eric forced her to eat off of the floor and also had given her a black eye, which then she had to go to a women's refuge. Now, unbeknownst to her family, this all went on for about 3 months before they got back together, and then he would eventually ask her for her hand in marriage. Eric Bakubi was eventually sentenced to a minimum of 30 years in prison, while Magali was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years. The judge told the couple that the case was very sadistic, and the belief in witchcraft, however genuine, cannot excuse the assault and killing of another human being. I'm also going to include a small clip of Kristys' father and the words that he had when he found out about the death of his son. Bonjour, mes amis. Oh, my French is not that good. So this crime occurred in a primarily French-speaking country, so therefore Kristys' father is speaking French in the interview. However, if you are playing this in the background and you're busy doing other things, you won't be able to read along with the transcription that I have here. So I will go ahead and translate what he is saying as he is saying it, so you can continue folding your laundry or cooking your dinner or chasing the kids around or whatever it is that you're doing while playing this video. Kristy was a normal child, like any other, when death took him from us. He was a child who liked football, and when his brother-in-law Eric was trying to arrange a place for him at a football academy in England, Kristy really devoted all of his time for training, and he was so proud. If a light bulb blew and I wasn't there, Kristy, he was kind of the man of the house, always there for his mother. If a shelf broke, I'd take it and we'd go to the workshop together. If you look in his bedroom, you'll see the cupboards and wardrobe that we made together on the weekends at the workshop and put up here at home. I know that we are all human and we all die one day, but I wish I could have died before Kristy. Sadly, in these circumstances, this is what happened. And I have found it difficult to overcome. I have a lot of pain. Everyone is suffering because of Kristy's absence. Everyone. Eric, he had our trust. He had our trust. My daughter, Magali, introduced him to me. You know, here I'm speaking as a parent who has a grown-up child. The day they came to you and say, "Dad, I want you to come meet my boyfriend," to please your daughter, I think you have to accept him. And you say, "My daughter has made a good choice." So to keep my daughter happy, I accepted Eric as if he was part of our family. But unfortunately, he brought us death, and that is a shame. As a businessman, my life is all about prevention, making things happen, anticipating things, seeing things that other people don't see. For example, if I know that we must send 4 workers over to a building site in 2 weeks' time, then in my head, 2 weeks beforehand, I've already started work on that site in my head. But those who are going to work there don't know yet that they will be going. So this is the rhythm of my life, always looking ahead, always seeing things before others, seeing things other people do not see. But I did not see Kristy's death coming because I trusted someone that I should not have trusted. Kristy's death, even though I always tried to anticipate things, the death of Kristy, it just slipped through my fingers. It's like a smoker who takes a drag of smoke and then breathes that smoke into the air and it disappears. That's how Kristy left, like that. Someone who was supposed to be going to England to celebrate the holiday, the New Year, with everyone. And the guy decides to kill him. And he comes back to me in a box. It's traumatizing for me as a parent, for my wife and I. The same for the other children who were there. It's traumatizing. What kind of world do we live in? Are we on Earth or in Mars to have to live through a thing like that? When you come home from work at 8 p.m. and you're watching the television and it's the news and there's a 4-year-old child who suffered a violent death at the hands of a pedophile, and you say to yourself, it's just a news story. You watch and you think it only happens to other people. But the day that it happens to you, as it happened to me, you feel what it does to you. I had so much pain in my heart that I can't express it. This pain. It took me a week and a half to start eating again. I thought my children were protected from this sort of thing. But sadly, you can't control everything in life. So if the police in London invest in trying to prevent this kind of thing, I can only encourage it so this thing can never happen again, because it's too unfair. It's too unfair. Because even a cow, when you take it over to the abattoir, which is like the meat market, you try not to distress it before killing it. And then you think of the 100 blows by Eric, a person I trusted. That makes you ask questions, real questions. This was definitely a hard case to read about, especially the suffering that Kristy went through, and he didn't do anything. None of them did. I don't know about you guys, but for me, child abuse or anything involving harm to children is always at the top of my list for people who are bottom of the barrel as far as the human race is concerned. The fact that you could do something to a child, it just baffles me. Now, Kristy, he was 15 at the time that he passed away, so he wasn't a small child, but nonetheless, he was still someone's child. And the fact that these people really believe that the kids had Kendoki is just wild to me. Like, there has to be a line that is drawn. Like, you have to know the difference between when you are practicing a belief versus committing a crime. You have to know the difference. There has to be a line that's drawn. And just like the judge said, you can have your beliefs, but once you start crossing the line and inflicting harm onto humans, that's where the belief has got to stop. Otherwise, you now enter the realm of the justice system. That's what happens. But in any event, I do want to send condolences to the family, because they were trying to come and save their child, but I guess Eric and Magali could not wait. And that's what eats me up, is the fact that it was Magali's man. Magali, his own blood sister, let this happen to him. DNA should not determine how many chances someone gets. You got one time rub me the wrong way, and after that, you're done. So if you haven't seen any of the other holiday horror stories, I will leave the last video right here for you, or you can also go to the description box where a link to the playlist will be available, and you can binge watch all of the cases that we have talked about for the holiday series so far. After that, you can just make sure to subscribe, share, like, and I'll see you in tomorrow's episode of Evil Strikes Holiday Horror Edition. Take care.